Good morning. As you can tell, y'all didn't pray enough, and your pastor is sick again. So this is y'all's fault. If anybody's dozing off and going to sleep or bored to death, this is on you. I did my part. I promise. I did my part. So this morning, I got a notice there about Thursday that Jake wasn't feeling very good. So I actually had a little more time to prepare and think about it. So I don't even have a decent excuse today as why it's going to be horrible, but it's just going to be, that's probably what it's going to be. But as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, what do we need to hear probably the most in our church? And the resounding thing that kept coming back to me was pretty much something I've noticed myself saying quite a bit for the last several years, but especially a lot for the last 6 months or so, is kind of either get on the boat and grab a paddle or don't expect to be taken somewhere. We're kind of used to, in 2022, getting a cruise ship ticket and having somebody take us wherever we want to go and be kind of catered to. But the reality is everything that we read in the Bible says that our life is probably going to be completely and totally the opposite of that. And so I guess if you would call today a title, it would be Get on the Boat. So as I was thinking about different things and kind of ways of describing this, I kept going back to the story of Noah and kind of his scenario of what he had to do to get through his season of trials. And as I got to thinking about that, I thought about how hard it is. Can you take me down just a little, Luke? How hard it is for us to do that, to experience those times of trials. And so as I got to thinking about that, I thought, what is some of the things that we find ourselves drawn to? And so I got to thinking about what's some of the things that brings me joy. One of the things that brings me the most joy is seeing the people that I love with a smile on their face, knowing that they're happy. And so this past fall, we were down at Marion, and I'm going to pick on Dave and Kathy's youngest for a chance. And I looked back, and I saw Alex Crane that had served in our youth ministry for a long time, playing a guitar and doing different things, fervently working a soundboard. I mean, literally very, very consumed in that. And that brought me joy. And I look around a lot of times through life, and we've been working with teenagers for a little over 20 years now, and you look back and you see a lot of them now serving by your side. Lucas is a prime example of that as well. I get to work with him every week, and I remember him when he was, and yes, it looks like we're twins, but we really aren't. There is an age gap just because we're the same size. And we actually mentioned that this morning, that yes, we're in the boat. We're both fat, and we're both round, and that's the boat that we're in. But we're talking about a different boat today, okay? So I think about that, and I think that's some of the things that brings me joy. I probably could have afforded to have bought my wife an engagement ring a few years before if I wouldn't have bought stock in a rose company, because I love to see the smile on her face every time that I would show up with a thing of roses. So I see that, and I love to see people in their joyful spot. And that's what I love to see. And so as I was thinking about that this week, and I thought about our church, and you're my family. So that's what I kind of go back to, is a lot of times whenever I see you guys serving with a smile on your face, it brings me more joy than what you'll ever understand. So as I was thinking about that, it made me think about Noah and kind of how all that came about. Because realistically, Noah had a pretty big task to do. So if you don't care, we're going to open up our Bibles to Genesis 6. We're going to start reading 9 and essentially through 14 here. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God, and Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has become before me. The earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover the inside and the outside with pitch. pretty much when Noah got this warning, he was pretty old. Does anybody know how old he was? 40, 50, 60? Thank you. I'm very interactive, so that's part of the ways that we try to keep you awake. So 500 years old. So pretty much nobody in here's got that beat. I know we're safe with that parameter, okay? So really no matter what it is, we have options to serve somehow, some way. This is a pretty major task that he had going on. Now, the best I can do is as research, and there's a whole lot of speculations on this, so I'm not, this is opinions here, so just block this part out. But the earth had been around for somewhere around 1,600 years after Adam and Eve populating the world. And so I was kind of blown away this week whenever I was doing this research, because I was trying to figure out if we were to guess, and this is all it is just a guess, what would the world's population be during the flood? And I don't know why, I've just always thought it was like a couple hundred people. I don't know why I've just never really thought about the earth really being overly populated at that point in time. And that's just me being gut level honest with you. I had never kind of dived in to see just exactly how populated the world would have been at that point in time. But speculations, if you go with growth rates in different ways, about 500 different people have about 5,000 different options as to what they think the population would be. But on a conservative side, most of them think 350 million. And on a generous side, some people think as high as 4 billion. That's about half of what's alive here. I was blown away at that. But if you go with the growth rate and the average rate that it takes for you to die, because you live to be 400, 500, 600 years old at that point in time, it's more astonishing than what I thought. So what I kept going back to is, even if you just make it a very, very conservative 350,000, say we're going to take 10% of the most conservative number that they put out, because I really don't necessarily trust a lot of what science says. I don't know why, but sometimes I struggle with what science says about different things. How many billions of years old that the earth is supposed to be at this point in time is what science sometimes proves. So I'm not even saying that that's right or even a decent number to go off of. But it humbled me. Humbled me a lot. Because during this time, it said that Noah was found to be a just man. And there's some verses here, I'll have him pop that up. Thus Noah did according to all that God had commanded him. So he did. Next one said, and Noah did according to all that the Lord had commanded him. So Noah was trying to do what was right. And you have, like I said, a conservative number of, say, 350,000 people watching him build the ark. Yet how many people got on the boat? This is where you are going to have to answer again. Remember how many people were on the boat? 8. Why? Why 8 people? If there's 300 people, 350,000 people, or 4.5 billion people, why only 8 people got on the boat? That humbled me, and that made me question so many of what we do, why we do, how we do it. And so it made me start thinking about our church. And once again, I go back to what brings me joy, which is a lot of what brings God joy, is to see people serve. I actually just got a glimpse of Aubrey sitting over here. Aubrey, you're 17, right? Some of the most joy that I've seen through the years is in a praise team whenever I see kids get up and lead other kids in worship. I see it bring joy and a passion in them that's really unlike anything else. And it's because we're created to serve. That's what we're made to do. So as I started thinking about this, why are all these people not on the boat? I started looking, and it said, it's pretty clear that Noah's dad had died 5 years before the flood. Noah's grandpa died the year of the flood. So maybe there would have been 10 people. So we're going to expand that a little bit more. So maybe there's a few more people that could have been on the boat. But they didn't, because life had different plans for them. But of all these other people, why didn't they get on the boat? I have a pretty sneaky suspicion probably, and it doesn't say this, so once again, this is a speculation, that probably several other people even helped Noah on the boat. Because during the whole boat building days, Noah was still building his family. This wasn't like this was his retirement plan. We think of him being 500 to 600 years old. This wasn't the only thing that he had going on. He was still having kids and proceeding with life. He still had to feed his kids, provide a place for them to live. So this is in the midst of everyday life that he had to do this on top of that. And so I got to thinking about what would it look like if you were in Noah's neighborhood for us to be doing. Do you think that some people maybe came by for a week and said, hey, this is a great idea. I want to help out. And then after a week they said, this guy's crazy. He thinks it's going to flood. We're sitting up here on top of a mountaintop practically. I mean, 10 Mile is not going to flood. The bottoms down here, they flood, right? But 10 Mile, it's going to take a lot of water to get water in this building, let alone over the top of the steeple. Everybody agree with that? So as we look around and we think, why aren't all these people working? I'm not for sure that some of them weren't. Maybe a lot of them were. But how many of them came for a day, a week, a month, a year, maybe even 20 years? And then after 20 years, they finally said, this guy is crazy. You know, he's wanting us to get on this boat with a bunch of stinky animals. By the way, if you look around, we're probably a bunch of stinky animals. We're not really any better. And that's what got me to thinking about why are we doing what we're doing and why aren't we doing more? And most generally, it's because either we didn't want to finish the race or some of the stinky animals offended us or we don't want to be cooped up that long with a bunch of stinky animals. They had to hang out on a boat for quite some time waiting for the water to subside. I'm satisfied that the ark smelt just like roses and whatever all the other fragrances that our wives like to bring home that makes the house smell nice and pretty, right? Anybody remember, for especially the guys in the room, what your high school gym locker room smelled like? I'd say that would probably smell great compared to what the ark smelled like. So maybe people just got frustrated thinking about, I don't want to be cooped up in this. I'm just going to take my chances. Surely to goodness, a mountaintop's not going to flood. Surely to goodness, there'll be another day. There'll be another way. Maybe this guy is all just talk. Maybe it's not really going to happen. Whatever the situation is, I look around at church and I think it's a very similar situation as it is today. There's approximately 8 billion people, just shy of 8 billion people on the face of the earth. We claim, and I say claim, that 25% claim to be Christians. Now, with that number, I would say that's probably a pretty generous number because I've served in a lot of places that, you go back to the stinky animal subject, if we say that Christians should be known by their fruits, some of them were not necessarily bearing great fruit. Some of them might have even stunk a little bit, kind of like what the animals were doing. And so when we think about that and we think, what are we bearing? What are we doing? What are we doing to further the kingdom? If we conservatively call 25% of the world's population Christians, and I would think that it's probably more like 10% or maybe even less, that's actually true born-again Christians. We look at it and it says that we're commanded, we're created to serve, we're created to be doing something more with our life. It's what we're here for. And so as I look at that and I think about that, I think, why aren't we doing more? And I think it's the exact same reasons today as what it was back then. We get offended, we get scared, we feel like we're not good enough, we're too old, we're too young. There's lots of different reasons, and they're all just fear-based lies from the enemy as to why we aren't serving. Or maybe fear-based, or not fear-based, but maybe problem-based lies of, I think somebody doesn't like me, or I think this would offend somebody, or I think whatever. And so no matter what it is, Satan kind of gets in our head and kind of messes with our minds to make us think that we're not worthy, we're not good enough. And if you read some of the stories in the Bible, you will find out that pretty much all of the heroes also had a 0 in their timeline somewhere. Noah was no different. Moses was no different. None of them are any different. We've been studying about King David here. King David was literally on the mountaintop, and I told Lucas this morning, he went skydiving without a parachute the next day. It's like it's literally hot, cold. We're no different. There's no reason for us to expect us to be any different because we're not going to be any different. But the part of the story is, and I'm going to read for another verse here. It's out of Ephesians 2:10. It says, "For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, for which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. We were created to be doing what we're doing here. And the church needs more volunteers. Another story that I want to share with you this morning is about Moses. In Exodus 7:11 through 14, we read that there was a war going on, and as long as Moses would stand upright and hold his arms up, the Israelites would win the war. As soon as he'd get tired and he'd put his arms down, they'd start losing. Has anybody ever changed a light bulb or something over their head? And they're like halfway through, they're just like, I got to give this thing a break. It's killing me. So maybe you'll change arms, you go back and forth. I find myself in predicaments like that on a real regular basis where it's really not that hard. You're not picking up 500 pounds. You're literally just holding your arm up. But you get tired. Now think about for the people that are serving here, right here, holding his arms up whenever we read this message. That sounds like a great place to have your face planted right there, right? Holding somebody's arm up all day out in the elements. I'm sure he was wearing Axe or whatever it is, perfect deodorant that, makes sure that nothing perspires that day. That's the story after story after story in the Bible. That serving is messy, serving is tiring, it's consuming. It's not perfect, it's not beautiful, and you're going to serve with other people that aren't perfect, that aren't beautiful. And sometimes your leaders are that person that isn't perfect and isn't beautiful. That's okay. Because if you go right back to the verse that we just read before, you were created to do this. They were created for the same reason as well. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean that anybody that you're going to be serving with or serving is perfect. But what does matter is that whenever you look back and you see the joy that has come, and this church has just celebrated 200 years consecutively. And in Illinois, that's a pretty major feat. 200 years of continually serving Hamilton County, even before Hamilton County was Hamilton County. That's pretty awesome, really, when you think about that. And I have no idea how much longer time is going to tarry. I really do feel like in my own spirit that things are getting kind of crazy, kind of a little more hectic, and even within the last week here, if you read much of the Bible, the wars and the rumors of wars, I really don't know how much longer we have here. I kind of hope, for selfish reasons, that it does get closed up before a whole lot longer, because it's getting to be kind of a crazy place to live, and I don't know if I really want my kids experiencing some of the hurt and pain that they're probably going to experience if it tarries for another 100 years. But that's just me being selfish. And so what we're supposed to be doing today is we're going to go back to that estimated 8 billion people on the face of the earth. That means that 6 billion people, according to our calculations, are lost and dying, going to hell. And what are we doing about it? A lot of us are sitting on a boat. We're getting paddled around. We're on the cruise ship mentality. We're getting paddled around, but we're not necessarily grabbing a paddle. I've got a couple pictures, and Mike's going to pull these up, of kind of what I feel like sometimes we do here. I feel like this right here is what a lot of our churches look like. Now, I don't know how far the shoreline goes there, but the guy's in a pretty decent-sized body of water. He's out there by himself. And what God has called our church to look like is the next picture. I mean, this is a streamlined deal where people are serving together. They're paddling their oars at the same time, in sync. Now, we know that that's probably not necessarily the reality of what we're going to look like. It's what we should look like, but it's probably not what we're going to look like. But a lot of people are content with the first picture. I'm going to show up. I'm going to have somebody cater to me to do what I want, how I want, music to the right loudness. I want just the right mix of these songs and those songs. It's okay if Jake preaches 35 minutes, but at 40 minutes, I'm already going to check out. I'd really prefer 20-minute sermonette instead. We get very, very comfortable with where we are, and we want things the way we want things. And when I go back and I think of what Moses and what Noah did in their times, they just needed people to show up sacrificially and support what they were doing. Even if they knew that today might have been a failure, that's okay. The other 364 days that we're working on it, were a success. This last week, there was 8 people in this church alone that got baptized, that lives changed, and they're changed for forever. They're written now in the Lamb's Book of Life. And that's awesome. Thank you. At least one person in here agrees with that. That's something that a lot of churches in Southern Illinois or in the United States don't experience in a year, let alone in the first 2 months of the year. So there's some great things that happen here. Once again, we're not perfect, but there's some great things that happen here on a real regular basis. And I guess I don't want to look around and continually see people almost disgruntled because they're not serving. Because if you go back to the verse that says we're created to serve, that means you're going to find yourself happiest when you're serving the way that God has asked you to serve. Not everybody in here was a carpenter to build an ark. That's fine. Maybe somebody is more designed to tend the animals. Maybe somebody's designed more to go out and gather hay for the animals to eat. There's lots and lots and lots of jobs here in this church, whether it's working in the nursery, in the children's program, door greeting. I mean, go back to the days that Mick Colbert talked to me a lot about some of the things. He said, I can't do this and I can't do that. But he said, one thing I can always do, and I can do it right. I can take out the trash before it ever needs to be taken out. And he said, I love to take out trash. He said, it brings me joy. Now, Mick is a good friend of mine, and Mick, there's a couple of heads nodding in here. Mick changed my life about as much as anybody could have ever changed my life by mentoring me. And I look at some of the ways that he served, and it was never with a selfish ambition. It was never to put himself out front. It was always just grab a paddle like this picture said and said, hey, we need to be moving, so let's move. Let's go. Let's get something done. And that's all we're asking of you guys. So as we've talked here a lot, what are we going to do? It's up to you. I have no idea what your gifts are. I struggle enough to remember what my gifts are and not get them confused with maybe what I want to do. And there's a song that's by 10th Avenue North that we used to sing in the youth quite a bit. It's a fairly old song now at this point in time, but the title of the song is Control. And the verse goes along and it says, God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. And that is a very loud statement for me because he doesn't need me. He doesn't need the drama that came in my life. He doesn't need all the good or the bad that comes with me. He doesn't need anything that we can bring because he created us. If he created us, he can create whatever it is that we're creating. But what he does want is he does want to look up, and just like I said at the beginning of the service, the joy that I love to see on people's faces, he wants that. He wants to see us prosper. He wants to see us grow. He wants to see us team up with other people and serve relentlessly to change the world. And so if we think of a statement that I use a lot that comes straight out of the Bible, that today is the day of salvation. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I've actually had a conversation this last week with a friend of mine that had a pretty bad wreck, and he's struggling to get along, but he is going to get along. He's going to be okay. But he just kept going back to that and saying over and over, you just don't know what tomorrow holds. And you don't. He had something in mind. He had something on his plan, and it's totally changed. And who knows if that thing that he had planned will happen in 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years, or if it'll ever happen. Because his plans changed in the blink of an eye. So if we think about that and we think of Hamilton County, we think of Illinois, we think of the world's population and these 6 billion people that are lost and dying and going to hell, we have an opportunity right here on this little bluff here to do something different for our community. Is this where revival could start? Absolutely. Is this where things could change that would change the world? Absolutely. God kind of has a sense of humor when it comes to doing great things in the middle of nowhere. That's kind of our address, if you haven't noticed by now. When you have to go 35 miles to get to the closest Walmart, you're probably in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, at this point in time, if you have to go more than 2 miles to get to a Family Dollar, you're probably in the middle of nowhere. And it's like 5 miles to ours. So we're like twice the average. So why aren't we doing more? And I think a lot of it comes down to us, and this is just us being gut level honest. It comes down to a lot of the times we don't let you know what opportunities are. And that's on us as a church. But so much of it is also How many times do we ask before we just assume that it probably isn't going to happen? And so it goes both ways. The point of today, though, is don't be content just sitting there because it's comfortable. Don't be content just sitting there because you don't know what to do or what to say or how to do it. I'll promise you, this was not on my agenda to be doing this today, 20 years ago. As much as I like to be a class clown in my class, and Gary's smiling, he knows I was a goofball that probably should have got kicked out of school even. I didn't care to make a fool of myself, but I didn't really want to get up in front of people and talk. This isn't who I am. It's not who I wanted to be. But I also know that if I go back to what Peter says, we always need to be ready to give a defense for the joy that we have in our life. In other words, always be ready to give your testimony. Always be ready to step in and do whatever God's asking you to do. Because we don't know what tomorrow holds. That means that we have to. So when opportunity presents itself, you either say yes or you cheat yourself of the joy and the possibilities that He has in store for you. So as usual, I've got 4 or 5 pages of notes that I've probably used virtually nothing of. But I'm going to ask if Jamie would start getting ready to close us here. And I'm going to give you guys a freebie for the day because I'm going to let you out like at least 10 or 15 minutes early here so you can tip me later. I got a few chuckles. So today as we close though, think about where you are. We're all in different places. We're on different walks of our life. Are you lost? Are you saved? Are you doing literally everything that you can for a ministry? Or are you trying to run from it because you don't think you have time? I'm satisfied Noah thought he probably didn't have time to take on the project that he had to take on. And some of that's probably why it took so long to build the ark, and maybe the flood would have come a few years earlier if he would have had more help. I don't know. But whether we're lost, whether we're saved, whether we're serving all day, every day, or never, if today's not over yet, that means you still have time today to change what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so whatever capacity that looks like, you all have different gifts. And it's gifts that I don't have, that Jamie doesn't have, that Jake doesn't have. Whatever gift you have, it was created so you could be here in today for this season to serve. And as you serve, try to keep it in check, to not be like some of Noah's neighbors that probably came for a week, a month, a year, maybe 20 years, whatever that looks like, and then it just faded out. Stay strong and finish till the end. And if we do that, I think when we look back at another 20 years down the road, or when we look back from heaven, there's going to be a lot of things that we find our joy in, and it will be whenever I see people that mentored me finding joy in what I'm doing, and the people that I've mentored finding joy in what they're doing, and continually growing. This church has got an opportunity that's really far above and beyond any other church that I know of for reaching people, and it's shown that. So all I ask is just be a part of it. So as we get ready to close here this morning, I'm going to ask Jamie to play us an altar call. The altar is open. Whether it is you want to talk about salvation, whether you want to talk about joining the church, getting baptized, whatever that looks like, come forward and do something today. Don't just sit there. So, thank you.